present levels of performance or baselines, okay? And that right there is where your child is currently functioning in whatever area with regards to educational performance areas that your IEP team is going to be developing goals for your child, okay? So you cannot create a good goal unless you have an understanding of your child's present levels of performance, and they need to be accurate. And that's what this is about. I'm going to explain how you get to that point so you can create a good goal. And then after you could create a good goal, that's when the team decides what services, what methodology, what approach, what teaching style, what needs to be done, and in what part of the school, like where, what location do these services need to be provided in order for the child to accomplish this tangible goal. It needs to be aggressive enough to be something that you're working toward over the course of the next school year. So you need a good starting point, which is what we call a baseline, which is what the law calls present levels of performance. Where is a child functioning? So you can create an aggressive goal, tangible aggressive goal, something that they can reach in light of their circumstances, to quote Andrew F. In light of their circumstances. So in light of their circumstances, like I've said many times, would be what scientifically proven and peer-reviewed approach would be necessary for their disability. That would be in light of their circumstances, you see. So it all comes together, but it goes nowhere if we don't have a good baseline. All right. Now, how do you get a good baseline? Now, a lot of schools, you're supposed to have your 3-year reevaluation. And there's two purposes for a 3-year reeval. The number one purpose is to determine whether your child still requires specialized instruction and still qualifies for an IEP. Okay. And, don't ever be afraid. It's not a negative experience, guys, because if we're doing our job, the goal is to always have our children move out of special education. That is the goal. So don't ever be afraid of it. Doesn't mean that your child no longer has a disability. It just means that they no longer require specialized instruction. Okay. And so the law allows for the IEP team to say, you know what, we don't need to go through the rigors of a reevaluation process because we can all mutually agree that the child still requires specialized instruction. And many, many, many schools do that. But there's a second reason we do evaluations, and we do them in order to understand the child's present levels of functioning. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go through an entire full reevaluation. We can target the evaluations that we require in order to get those accurate numbers. Okay? But so many times IEP teams make the mistake of shooting in the dark, proverbially, and just sort of guessing where the child is currently functioning. Other times they use normative tests that they give to all the students. Well, your child isn't all the students. Your child has an IEP. Your child requires more than what everybody else is getting. And so, so I have a lot of schools, they'll sit there and say, well, we use the dibbles. Well, the dibbles is good to show this. Might not be sufficient to show the deficits and to show some of those other areas that may be latent issues, but tied to their known disability in order to really establish a good baseline and also have a little foresight on what might be coming. Because I can tell you, it's very frustrating to me as an attorney when I can see for a high-functioning autistic kid, a kid that has, let's say, severe ADHD, a kid that has developmental disabilities, and a kid that has specific learning disabilities, not yet really recognize, that sort of dyslexia not, or dyslexia light, or sort of to where you don't really understand what it is until the child hits that grade, like right around 3rd or 4th grade, to where they transition from learning to read to reading to learn, which then pulls from the other areas of that are necessary, comprehension, visualization, things of that nature, which they don't cover necessarily kindergarten through 3rd grade. And so, some foresight and some understanding is in those earlier grades, sort of probing for that stuff because the child has an IEP. That can be done. So what do I recommend? Guys, you need to evaluate, it doesn't have to be a full reevaluation, but sufficient enough in order for there to be good, reliable baselines so that you can create good, reliable goals that make sense and that you can understand in plain English. Guys, don't sit around as a parent and shake your head like you understand what that math goal means. Because I can tell you, most of the time, the school staff don't really understand what that goal means. They're supposed to individualize that goal. As far as tied to the state standard, yeah, it's tied to the state standard, but it needs to be changed to individualize it for your child. And it needs to be sort of in plain English. And so many times you can't understand the goal. And if you can't understand the goal, and if they're sitting there having to explain all the technical language, they don't understand it either. Write it in plain English. And then after that, then you design the what methodology, what approach, what teaching style, what scientifically proven, peer-reviewed approach works for your child's disability in light of their circumstances to accomplish that goal. And then draft it in the IEP that way. It all starts in understanding your child's present levels of performance.